Neighborhoods with the most violence are usually faced with many other problems, from poverty to underperforming schools and health hazards, even the stress of daily life. These can all be thought of as matters of public health, and they're very much a concern in the Bowdoin, Geneva neighborhood of Dorchester. For the past few days, the Boston Globe has run a series of in-depth articles and video reports on the neighborhood, following a long history of gun violence and a new strategy for response by the city. Our guests are from a community agency with a key role in that strategy, the Bowdoin Street Health Center. We'd like to welcome the operations manager for practice and community health, Philemon Laptist, and the coordinator of the Violence Prevention and Intervention, or VIP initiative, Susan Young. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
You're also both two people who grew up in this neighborhood. Starting with Philemon, how has this neighborhood changed since you remember when you were very young?
Well, for me, I think that my mom still lives on Bowdoin Street, and I go there pretty much every day. I think that what's changed is, I would say, that there's different cultures that are starting. So I'm seeing a larger Cape Verdean population that is there now than when it was when I was growing up. I also think that it's changed in the sense that people aren't neighborly to one another anymore. I felt like I knew my neighbors on both sides growing up always, regardless of if it was a new family or a family that lived there for a long time. And I think that that's not the case now. You see more people moving in and out more frequently, as opposed to how it was years ago.
Susan Young, what about the changes that you've seen?
For me, it's a little different outlook. I grew up in a neighborhood that was really close-knit. Every resident spoke to each other. They welcomed us in their home. They gave us cookies. We went into each other's home. We were quite friendly. We were able to play with each other. Every parent knew each other on the street. So I definitely got a different look than Philly, because I have the old, back in the 1960s, where people got along and they worked together as a community. People picked up trash when they saw it on the streets and cleaned up in front of their homes. So I have a little different look on it.
Philemon, the neighborhood has undergone racial change in the past few decades. Long before that, there were still some tough kids looking for trouble, but today we have guns.
Right. I think that in the 90s, we definitely had our fair share of more gangs. Like, you saw them on the corner, it was visible. I feel like now it's, I don't know if Susan, you would say, I feel like now it's more of a curiosity. Does this street have a gang, or do they not have a gang? But I think that the difference between the 90s and now, I feel like there's the violence then was much more targeted. They went after who they had to go after. Not that it was good, but that I feel like the violence was direct. I feel like now anyone is in danger, and that's not really a good feeling.
What about the access? How easy is it for kids to come across guns? Either of you have any sense of what you're hearing from that neighborhood?
Well, from what we're seeing and hearing, that it's quite easy, because it seems like everyone is able to obtain a gun. It seems like it's quite easy. And we know that Massachusetts have we have a really tough gun law here, but we assume that it's coming in from elsewhere, and they're bringing them in, whether it's through straw purchasers or from getting it across the borders, but it's getting in here.
Philemon, what about the thing that we heard often, the chain of violence? When violence hurts one person, it's almost like something that just bounces. How do you see your work trying to break that chain?
I think it's very tough. I think that it does have an impact not only on the families that it impacts directly, but I think that it's overwhelmingly spreading towards everyone else. I feel like everyone else feels that impact some way, somehow, because it could be a neighbor, a friend of a friend. With Facebook now, I feel like almost every time I go on, it's someone saying RIP to someone else. And it may not be somebody that I know directly, but it may be, you know, someone that I'm connected to, or we're both connected to. I think that for me, it's like we do this work every day, and sometimes it feels like it's in vain when we hear there's another shooting. We try to engage some of the young people, some of the families. We do work hard, but, you know, sometimes it's a struggle, you know, to get out there and do it every day, knowing that we do feel like our work is making an impact, but we want it to make a huge impact, and that's the tough part.
Susan Young, what about your work? Because one act of violence always foretells another. So how do you jump in there and prevent?
Well, you know, we try our best in VIP and Bowdoin Street Health Center. We try to work with families to encourage them to get out and get involved. I think first it has to start from the community. The residents have to get involved in order to make changes in the community. And without that, it's going to be tough. It's a hard road, but we do our best that we can. You know, it's a challenge, but Mr. Davis' story, as you've seen in the newspaper.
And his son was killed a few years ago.
Yes, right? And that's, to me, highlights what other families are going, happening to them in the community, how they're feeling. This is just one story, but imagine how many shootings that we have had and the families that it has impacted their lives.
Mm-hmm. I feel like one of the things about the Davis family, husband and wife, kids who in many respects have a lot going for them. Yes, one kid is in trouble right now, but you also wonder, why do they stay in the neighborhood if all these terrible things happen around there?
Well, my response, I can speak to that because I still live in the neighborhood, and my thoughts around this is if all the good people keep leaving, who's going to stay and help to make that change? I've thought about it many times, moving my own family, and I'll be honest and tell you I've even had my house on the market, but I had no offers. But then the more I thought about it and the work that I do, and I'm like, if I'm telling people let's stay and let's make change, how can I leave? So it's hard to say, just to pick up and leave, especially when you have roots there. I mean, my mom, my family, everyone lives so close. We're so easy to get to one another, and it's easier for me with my family. And, I was in school at one point. So I think that it's easier said than done. But like I said, if all the good people keep leaving, how is there ever going to be change?
Susan, one of the things that this Globe series brought to my attention, you have these gray areas that can easily fall through the cracks, and there are people who are not really bad people, they're not making a lot of trouble, but they could even just be a target for trouble. Maybe they're still trying to figure out how to get their life on course. And it looks as if an important part of your job is to really pay attention to people in that juncture. Mm-hmm. There's a fellow named Tal, I think, who might be that kind of a person. Yeah,
Tal's a good kid. Tal just needs some direction and some guidance, and Tal will blossom. But it's just he needs individual. He needs help. He needs services to get him on the road, the right path. He wants to do well. It's just he needs backing up. And sometimes we view people as bad when they're really not bad. They have a heart, they're a human being, and they want to do well. It's just sometimes the street life gets a different outlook on a person.
He organized a peace party, and some people might say, well, that's just a party in the summertime. Maybe that doesn't mean much of anything, but from reading the story, it looked as if that was an important thing for him and his neighbors.
No, he meant it. He came to Philly and I, and came with a proposal, and he also went to the Boston Police, and we spoke to them as well, and we came up with a plan that we would help him because he wants to change, and if we turn our back on him, what are we really saying?
That's true. I think the best part about that experience with Tal was that when he came to Susan and I, we said, well, if this is what you want to do, don't expect us to do the work. This is what you need to do. I gave him a pad and a pen, and Susan and I sat down, like, first you got to contact this person, you got to knock on the doors, you got to get a petition, everyone has to agree to it. We gave him a complete rundown of all the things that he had to do, and once every task he completed, I felt like he came in and checked in with us because he was proud that, okay, I did this, what's next? So we kind of walked him through the steps that he had to do in order to make the event happen, but I think that was certainly a good thing for him. He felt good about it.
You have a woman named Jana who's trying to get people interested in gardening, and it may not be the garden of her dreams yet, but talk about what's important in all just the networking that's going on with the people in the neighborhood she's doing.
I think that Jana's work, we had a chance to meet and talk about, some of the things that she's working on currently, including the garden. The garden piece I knew that she was working on, but not until I read the story. That's when I realized that was gardening was new to her. So that was great to hear that she made that effort. I think a lot of the people or a lot of the agencies in the community, we've been meeting pretty much for, I want to say, almost 2 years. We've we call ourselves the Bowdoin Geneva Alliance. And with that, we try to work together. We try to collaborate on different events. So rather than having several different back-to-school events, we're going to try to collaborate this year and do one big back-to-school event. So we've been working to make sure events that are encouraging people to get to know one another, to get to know their neighbors. We created a calendar, and we've been definitely, we meet once a month to talk about like the human services side of things. Like how can we make our agencies, our resources more accessible to people in the neighborhood. And so instead of doubling up on the, overlapping, how can we work together?
Susan, what about that? Is there still a desire to make sure that more people in the neighborhood know about the kind of help that you can offer them?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for me, for Jana was really interesting with her because her piece of the story, because the gardening, people think of it as a simple thing, gardening. But she was actually, if you think about it deeper, bringing people together, people that don't know each other, right. People to work together and build something in that community, where growing fresh vegetables. Yeah. And she went a step ahead in cleaning the streets as well and getting people to come out. So if you look at that, it wasn't just a garden project. It was right. Really something that she was bringing people together and agencies together.
Right. I was really impressed with the part in the article that spoke specifically about her wanting to do, like grow her own plants, not plants, but flowers in the garden, and then beautifying the rest of the neighborhood with it. So it's almost like spreading the wealth. So mm-hmm. I think that she's doing great work. I'm glad she's there and she's involved. And I do look forward to us working together. We did talk about a few projects that we can work on moving forward, and I hope we definitely have the opportunity to do that.
You talk about the assets in the neighborhood. In addition, you've got the teen center around the St. Peter's Parish grounds and things going on up at Roland Park. But as the city pointed out, a lot of people in this neighborhood, for whatever reason, are sending their kids to school outside the neighborhood. So how do you weigh that against what you're trying to do to get more people to do things in the neighborhood and get more connected?
That's a good question. For that one, I think the school is a separate issue, I think, from the work we do. Mm-hmm. But I think what we have to do for people in the communities, get them to recognize that they do have a beautiful place they live in. And there's a lot that is offered there. Mm-hmm. And just to get them to come out. So I think the school is a personal issue, how parents feel. Mm-hmm. But I think for us, for all the agencies in the Bowdoin Geneva Alliance, as well as other agencies, our job is to get them to come out and know that we care about our community that we live in, and that this is a beautiful place to live, and there's things that they can do there.
Really, anything you can add to this to say, at least anything has happened, let's say, in the past year that makes you feel that these efforts are at least getting people closer to where they want to be? Mm-hmm.
I can definitely say that on December 7th, we had our first collaborative event, and it was a Christmas caroling event. And I can tell you we had anywhere from 115 to 120 participants, and we walked from the Holland Community Center all the way to the First Parish Church, and we stopped along the way, and we serenaded a lot of the businesses and a few of the residents. I think that brought a great feeling back to the community. I think everyone kept saying, I can't tell you the amount of times we heard people say, this is great, we need more of this, we need more of this. So I think that the more we work together, collaboratively, collectively, not just the agencies within Bowdoin Geneva, but also the city services that service that neighborhood, I think that change will happen. I'm a strong believer that change will happen in this neighborhood. Some people tell me, I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't think it may not happen right away, but I think that there's a bright future for the neighborhood.
Well, thank you both, Philomene Laptist and Susan Young from the Bowdoin Street Health Center.